And hello, so I'm Jessica Mazzia. I work at the Career Development Center of Purchase. But for today, who I want to introduce is Simone Varadian, who is a Purchase alum. I want to say that first, but also, of course, very importantly, the Senior Director of Graduate Admissions at the New School. And she is just wonderfully taking time today to help you understand the importance of the personal statement and hopefully answer your questions too. And so we definitely want you to ask questions as well. So I'm going to kind of give it over to Simone now.
Thank you so much, Jessica, for such a generous introduction. And I'm going to share my screen for a moment just to get us rolling. Okay. Maybe give me a thumbs up. You can see everything's good. Great. So again, I'm Simone Varadian, and I am such a proud Purchase alum. I graduated a long time ago, but actually when I graduated, I was so fortunate to secure a job in the Office of Admission right out of Purchase. I was a student worker when I was in school in the continuing education office, and I loved it so much I didn't want to leave. And so I was in undergraduate admission at Purchase for about 6 years or so before moving on to Teachers College, the School of Education for Columbia University. And for the last 2.5 years, I've been at the New School. And so I am really so pleased for any opportunity I have to come back, whether it's virtually or in person, to meet with Purchase students. And I do mean that sincerely. As you maybe have heard from our conversation just as we were beginning, I'm also from a seemingly now from a Purchase family. My brother works on campus, so if you're ever dropping by the mail room to pick up a package, or you see him around with a goatee, that's my brother Rich. You just feel free to tell him that you saw me today, and he's a very friendly guy. So okay. So today we are really diving into what I think is the most important part of a graduate school application, which is your statement of purpose. Just before we get rolling, I would love to learn a little bit more about this group and understand a little bit about what types of grad programs you're thinking about applying to, whether it's doctorate or master's degree, and what academic fields you're thinking about, just to help give me a little bit of perspective about what you're looking to do. You're welcome to just drop it in the chat, or if you feel comfortable putting on your mic, that's fine too. While you're doing that, I'll share that when I graduated from Purchase, it took me a little bit of time before I decided to go to grad school. So it's okay if you're planning to not go right immediately. Ooh, I'm able to see a little hand raised, but for some reason I can't see your name. Mental health counselor.
It's me. Hi. I'm Karina.
Hey, Karina.
And I'm going to apply to master's programs in bilingual school psychology. And I'm thinking about also applying to a psychology doctorate program for bilingual school psychology also.
Cool. All right. Are there any others with their hands raised? It's a little bit hard to see. And
I can read you some in the chat. So we have a master's in mental health counseling, a PhD in PhD in sociology, master's in art history with museum studies or curatorial studies. And then I'm a senior here at Purchase with in economics, so continue on to a master's program and preferably be in New York.
Excellent. All right, and I know today isn't a presentation about the New School, but I hope some of you are thinking about the New School because we've got some great programs for you. Okay, that'll be my last New School pitch. Here we go. Let's just dig in. So agenda today. First, I want to talk about really what admission committees are looking for. And of course, we're trying to be broad as possible to touch upon all of these different disciplines. But the ideal, in quotes, graduate applicant. So what are admission committees looking for when they're looking at your application, and more specifically, your statement of purpose? I think it's really important to understand the differences between what an undergraduate admission committee is looking for versus a graduate admission committee, because that will help inform a little bit about the work that you're going to put into your statement of purpose as well. And thinking about how does the statement fit in with the context of the rest of your application file? Then, of course, the meat and potatoes, digging into the actual statement itself, some overarching do's and don'ts, some tips to leave you with, and then identifying the essential people in your corner to help get you to the finish line. And of course, leaving as much time as we can for any questions you might have in the end. So let's talk about the ideal graduate student. So when a graduate admission committee is looking at your file, here are the things they're really trying to ascertain from the materials you're submitting. The first is that you have a genuine interest in your field of study. So that you're not applying just because you feel like, oh, the next thing on my to-do list is to go to graduate school, but that you can actually speak and provide a genuine dialogue about why you want to pursue this field. That you have a strong fit with the institution, meaning the college or university you're applying to, and specifically the program you're applying to, that you're applying to a program that's right for you, and that we are right for you and you are right for that program. So it's reciprocal in that way. That you have an appropriate amount of professional experience for that program. And that doesn't mean that you have tons and tons of experience, but that for that particular program, you have the right amount of experience. In some programs, they're really quite pleased for you to come right out of undergrad. And for some, they might want a few more years. So making sure that you're applying right in that sweet spot of what is appropriate for that particular program. Of course, that for whatever is defined as strong, depending on the program you're applying to, but you are a strong, hardworking student, whether it's a fine arts program or whether it's a program in social sciences disciplines or a psychology program, that you are strong by whatever is defined by that academic discipline, and that you aren't afraid of working hard, of course. And lastly, what I think is most important in the context of your statement is that you have clearly defined goals, that your statement provides for us very clear pathway of where you're looking to go when you graduate. So as I mentioned, I think it's important to think about what the difference is between your graduate versus your undergraduate application process and statement. So the last time you submitted a statement was probably when you were applying to undergrad. So let's look at what the big differences are there. So when you're applying to an undergraduate program, a bachelor's degree program, it's most likely an office of admission that's reviewing your application file. It'll be someone like me who's making a decision based on the materials that you've submitted. Of course, there are some exceptions there. At a place like Purchase, you are involving faculty in, let's say you're applying to the acting program, the faculty are going to be involved there. But by and large, for most programs, in particular in the liberal arts, it'll be an admission committee that's making that decision. An admission committee that is in the office of admission. Typically, they'll also be looking for broad academic review. So we know that for many undergraduate students, myself included, you're going to change majors, or you might think about changing majors. You maybe don't have it all figured out yet when you're 17 applying. And so we're looking to see that your strength as an applicant, and not necessarily thinking this person is definitely going to stay in the program they're saying they're going to apply to. So we're looking for you broadly. And of course, working to understand your past, your story until now. So everything up till the date you apply. Now for graduate, it's a little bit different. Much more likely that the folks who are really instrumental in your application review are going to be the faculty for the program you're applying to. So if you are applying to a PhD in sociology, it's going to be the faculty in the sociology program that are playing a much larger role in your review. So you'll think about that as you're writing your statement. Who are the eyeballs that are going to be on this statement? And it's largely going to be the faculty from that program. And with that in mind, it's very specific. So most graduate programs in schools, if you apply and you're admitted to the sociology program, because they want to know very specifically about your candidacy to that program, if you later decide, you know what, I've taken a few econ courses and I'd like to switch to econ, that's a whole new, you are starting back and you're doing a new application. So I say that just to say it's very specific to the program you're applying to, the application review. And lastly, the focus is on the future. So rather than thinking about your entire past and your life story until now, It's thinking about where you are today and where you're looking to go in the future. So that's where we see the big differences in what you might write for an undergraduate statement versus a graduate statement. And both are appropriate for the time in your life and where you are when you're applying to an undergraduate program versus a graduate program. But this is a way to think about what your admission materials overall should convey when you're applying to grad school. So let's talk about the statement of purpose in the context of your entire application file, because of course, when you apply, you're not just giving us a statement. So your first item is that online application, which is you just filling out an online form. Typically, it will be many pages. Your resume, which is your professional experience until now. Not a whole lot you can do about that. When it's time to apply, your experience is your experience, and that's all you're able to provide us with. Your transcripts, so all of your academic coursework. Again, not a whole lot you can do about that. It's the grades you've earned until now, and you can't change what's happened in the past, but you're going to give us what you've got. Your letters of recommendation are so important, but that's what somebody else has to say about you. Again, you don't have a lot of control there. Supplemental materials. So depending on the programs you're applying to, I work with a lot of students in art and design, and so they're going to be submitting portfolios or writing samples. And so this is all really important, but your sort of ethos as an artist or in that way is not going to change a lot when it's time to apply. You're going to give your materials. And test scores, which are becoming less and less common, but certainly for a lot of programs, you're submitting GRE or GMAT scores. But your statement of purpose is where you have the most control to tell your story. And so I think it's really important for that reason that you don't underestimate how important a statement of purpose can be, because it's where you are able to really provide the framework for the rest of your materials, where you have a little bit less control of how your story is told. So with that in mind, I have a clunky analogy, so forgive me. I mentioned the statement is really that that framework for the rest of the materials in your file. So all of the other items in your file are going to tell us bits and pieces about your professional background, your personal achievements, your references from others, your academic coursework, but your statement brings it all together and tells us the full and complete story about who you are and what all of this mix of materials should tell us about you. So here we go. Now, before moving forward, I think there's a really important caveat here, which is to say that each individual college and program is going to make you crazy by having a different statement of purpose prompt. And they will maybe all be semi-similar to each other, but a little bit different, and might have a different word count or a different number of pages. So it's really, really important once you identify the schools you're applying to, that you do the work of identifying what is the specific prompt for each school you're applying to, because it will be different from school to school. And it's so important that you are tailoring your statement per the school, to the school you're applying to. But to give you an example, just to shoot for, to give us a framework, so to speak, of what a statement often includes. Here's an example statement prompt. And I will share in full disclosure, this is one of the statements that we use at the new school, but it's sort of one of our more general prompts that you'll see. And you'll see here that the description is asking you to outline your reasons for applying to the program, the ways in which you want to contribute to the subject matter of your specific program, a description of your background, a tentative plan of study, an area of inquiry in the field, and how you now envision it, along with your professional goals and how this program will help you to realize those goals. So it's a lot packed in there, but this is fairly typical of the types of prompts that you're going to see in your statement. Now, with a prompt like this and many other prompts I see, there are some questions I like to think about as students are working on their prompts. The first is, why you? Why this university and academic program? And why now? And why now is a little, maybe something you haven't thought about yet, but to say, why is this the right time to be doing this? and really making sure this is clear. Now, of course, in your statement, you're never going to write, why you, colon, here's why me, why this university, colon, this is why. But these are sort of questions you'll want to have answers and responses to embed into your statement. But let's dig in a little bit. So addressing your past. As I mentioned, an undergraduate statement is really looking for you to give that sort of back history until now, where your graduate statement is looking much more forward, your goals and aspirations and where you're looking to go and why this program is right for you. But we know that it's not realistic or easy to talk about the future without touching upon the elements of your past that are informing your goals for the future. But I would advise you to move forward delicately, to be selective about the information you include, because your statement should not be an autobiography and it should not be just a resume in prose. So it shouldn't be you taking your entire resume and typing it up into a statement. It should be focused on the elements of your personal history that inform your future academic and professional goals. So as an example, if you were applying to an education program and your personal interest was related to first generation college students and the experience of first generation college students. If you yourself are a first generation college student, that's certainly something that might, if it informs your desire to pursue this area of research or work, of course, yes, it makes sense to include that as part of your personal history if it informs why you're looking to go there. Do you need to spend 3 pages writing about your personal history? No, definitely not, because the admission committee wants to know, okay, that helps us understand a little bit why the motivation, but also, or maybe the origin story of why this student might be interested in this, but we want to know that they're interested in more than their own personal story, but how they're looking to move forward from here. Now, I will say for very specific personal extenuating circumstance information, there's very often another place in the application for you to provide that information. So if you feel like, you know, you had one really rough semester because you had a difficult situation in your family or something tough that came up, and you don't necessarily want it to be included in your statement of purpose, you don't want it to be a focal point of your statement of purpose, but you think it would be helpful for the admission committee to have that understanding and context, there's definitely opportunity for you to share that information, but I would advise you to include it separate from your statement of purpose. And I will go into that a little bit later, but very often colleges and universities will include a section for you to do that briefly without having to make it the focal point of your statement of purpose. Now, addressing your goals. To me, this is the fun stuff. Really addressing your specific research and professional interests and goals in your desired discipline. And in a moment, I'm going to share a little bit more about how you can really do that. But identifying why is this the right time for you, and can your goals be met with this degree program, this degree and this program at this university? And so identifying exactly what it is within, let's say, psychology or mental health counseling or sociology. What is it about that discipline very specifically that interests you? And not being afraid to get specific. And so going there in your statement is really important, because it helps the committee to know that you are a serious candidate who's put some thought into this, and that you're not just picking a program from a list because you happen to like the broad discipline. Now, how can the goals be met with your degree program and university? This is where you're addressing your academic alignment with the program. And sometimes you hear this referred to as your academic fit with the program. I know fit is not an ideal word, so I'll use alignment instead. But the truth is, there is no shortcut. You just have to do your research on every program you're applying to. I wish there was a shortcut, but there isn't. So you're going to put your internet sleuthing skills to the test. And this is where you're going to really dig in and learn as much as you can about the programs you're applying to. And again, if you're applying to a bunch of programs, it's going to be a lot of work. You'll have to go to each of those program websites to do that. But what you are really trying to get at is learning the faculty and their work, the program curriculum, the research centers that exist, the opportunities, the alumni and student outcomes, really identifying what makes this program at this university unique compared to other programs at other universities, especially in some of the disciplines you've mentioned here today. These are great fields, but the way a sociology program looks at school A will often be very different than a sociology program at school B. And so you've probably started to do that research and you've identified the schools that are really doing the work that interests you. I think a red flag for a lot of admission committees is when a student isn't able to really identify why their specific program is right for the student. So some of the tools, thankfully, right now, I mean, in this day and age, we have the entire internet at our fingertips. And so it isn't a mystery about what these programs are up to. So your first obvious tools are looking at the faculty bios on your program's website. So you're going to be researching your faculty individually and seeing what is it about what research are they conducting that interests you. So looking at their published research, looking at the required courses and electives, and I might be digging into some of the topic of what tomorrow's presentation is going to be, but all of this really should really be pulled into your statement of purpose. So looking at the faculty bios, their published research, the required courses, and what I think can be a really interesting nugget into the real interest of a program will be the electives, especially the electives that are offered frequently each year, that they're offered often, because it tells you a little bit about the faculty of today, what they're really interested in doing, as opposed to the faculty who founded the program 50 years ago, which is what the program requirements are going to be. But the electives might give you a glimpse into what is really the passion of the faculty in the program. You'll also find recorded lectures and conference presentations. The challenges of the last year and a half have really meant that a lot of this information is right at our fingertips. These conference presentations or recorded sessions in the past would have just been offered in a hall somewhere that only the people in that room would have seen. But because so much of this is now recorded, it's available to you. And so don't be bashful about referring to those things specifically in your statement that help you demonstrate your alignment with that academic program. So some overarching statement of purpose do's and don'ts. The first is really being careful to follow the designated length limit, even font. Some schools will be pretty specific about what font they're looking for you to use. Don't get too crazy with the wing zings and all of that. And the formatting, if they're looking for it to be double spaced or not, keeping in mind that admission committees are reading hundreds and hundreds of statements. And so our eyes grow weary. So we advise you to do for most cases, do double space, make it easy on us to read. Strive for clarity and concision. So it's not necessary to meet the top of the word count if that's not really necessary to tell your story. To show and not tell. So when you are writing your statement, instead of saying, I'm a perfect fit for you and this is why, use the opportunity to instead talk about the things that interest you, knowing that it aligns with the program you're applying to. So showing it through your work, through your interest, without connecting the dots in such a way that makes it sound like it's perhaps insincere. Research. I can't emphasize it enough. The work you put into that research will pay off for you when it's time to write your statement, because the program will know, oh, this is a student who's really serious about our program, has done their work. They know what makes our program unique and special compared to other programs that are out there. And again, demonstrate that you've done your homework on the specific program and the faculty members in those programs, because they are the ones who are reading your file and making the decisions. But don't let that intimidate or scare you. It just means that you can be as into the specifics as you'd like, because they would love to see that. A few don'ts. One thing I haven't mentioned, but the statement of purpose is also an assessment of your writing abilities. So it's really important that you are serious about your spelling and grammar mistakes. And so there are many folks at Purchase who are able to help you with this, but don't forget to check for that, because it is a major component, especially if you're going into a social science discipline or a discipline in any field where there's heavy reading, writing, including law. Your strong writing needs to come through in the statement. Again, recycling your statements is really a challenge, is something you want to avoid. It can be very clear when a student isn't following the specific guidelines of a statement prompt. And so putting the time in on the front end to make sure you're writing a customized statement prompt is helpful. Again, don't focus entirely on your past. This shouldn't be an autobiography. It should be forward thinking. So as you're writing your statement, writing and rewriting and reading it, really think about, gosh, what percentage of this statement am I spending talking about the past versus talking about the future and where I'm looking to go? Am I referring to my past as a way to talk about where I'm looking to go in the future? And if so, then you're in the right direction. But if you've spent the majority of your statement writing an autobiography, you've done it wrong. And again, don't underestimate the importance of a statement. I've seen statements truly make or break an applicant, especially for a student who's right on the bubble, who an admission committee is not sure about, or is maybe has slightly lower academics than a typical applicant. With a strong statement, it does put you over the edge. A statement can be really critically important in that way. Now, I mentioned earlier that there are some situations in which a student might want to provide additional information, and these are truly extenuating special circumstances. So I would advise, if you can, to avoid putting it in your statement of purpose. If you don't want it to be a part of the discussion about your academic goals and your future, you don't necessarily want to use that space to talk about something from your past that is sort of irrelevant to your program. And so these might be interruptions in your education. Let's say you had to take a year off to help a family member with something, inconsistencies in your educational history. You had something go on and it really had an impact on your grades for a semester or a year or so. This is generally not required, and it shouldn't be used as an additional statement of purpose or an additional writing sample. But most colleges will have a section in their application that says, is there anything else you think we should know about you that you want to share here? So you'll find that in an online application. And this is where you might write a few lines that indicate a little bit about your history from this year, from this semester to this semester. This was going on in my life. It impacted my grades. I'm pleased to have rebounded from it, that sort of thing. But if you see that section in the application and you don't really have anything to share, you just skip that section and move on, because that can often seem like you're a student. If you do use that space and you really shouldn't be using that space, that can also send probably an unintended message. So use it thoughtfully if it applies to you. Now, there are people in your corner, so people who can help you with this. The admission officers from the school you're applying to, I know I'm starting at the bottom, are folks like me, and we're able to help to an extent. So we can't help proofread for you or really work with you on the development of your statement of purpose, because that would put us in a sort of compromised position. But the reason why folks like Jessica from the Career Development Office are able to ask us about this is because we talk about statement of purposes all day long. And so there are, in many cases, the schools you're applying to might be offering presentations like this that are even better because they're targeted to applicants from their school. So you can always ask admission offices if they have any tools to provide, and many will. They'll have a recorded presentation or a specialized presentation that's really specific to the program you're applying to. So they can't help you proofread your statement or work with you in that way, but they can give you some sort of tips that they provide to help you to put your best foot forward. But there are other folks who can help you, including the terrific folks in the Career Development Office, your online writing lab, where you can look for tips, especially when it comes to proofreading. And what's very common and when you're applying to graduate schools is your faculty advisors. So they are often the folks who are really helping students on their way to graduate school. As you know, they're likely writing your statements, your recommendations, and so they can be great folks to talk to about what is typical. Now, I'm really pleased at this point to answer any questions you might have. I also had a little bit of a realization. I was telling Jessica as I was putting this together, putting final finishing touches this morning, that I'd love to share if others are sort of struggling with writing your statements. But for now, I see there's a few in the chat box. Here we go. Recycling your statement. I see. So Carrie, I'll dig in. So what do we mean by recycling your statement? Recycling means you write one statement and you send it to every school you're applying to and are not customizing it to the school you're applying to, so that your statement is very generic and doesn't really speak to the reasons that particular program is right for you. We know there's going to be some sections that you might be borrowing from. We're not naive about that, but if you're using the same exact statement for everyone, you might not be providing the program specific information that will be impactful to the programs you're applying to. Are there any particular programs who require professional experience before applying? Yes. But it will vary from school to school. I know there are some programs that are, some cases, business related programs will want you to have a certain amount of years of professional experience. So that's very common. That's the sort of the biggest field in our programs at the school I work for. That's where we see the most amount of discussion about professional experience. And so when you look at those schools, be sure to ask so that you're not spending your time, worrying about it now if it maybe makes more sense for you to apply to that program in a few years after you've gotten more work experience under your belt. And they might be able to share with you how they envision internship experience. Is that sufficient work experience or not? So I'll share, because this is a quiet group, although I welcome your comments, your questions rather. I'm going to go back. So often there'll be a fairly generic statement of purpose prompt. So here's the prompt that one of our more boring prompts at the new school. I'll say, in one school at the new school, we have about 20 programs, and we have about 12 different statement prompts that are used among those different programs. So it's really important that you are figuring out what your program prompts are so that you are writing a statement that makes sense for that program. But in the last year, some of the programs that I work with had updated their statement prompt. They'd been using the same prompt for a long time, and they updated it to ask the students specifically to address what they feel is the greatest challenge of their generation, and how do they see that particular discipline addressing that challenge. And when I tell you the statements that we received were so moving, were so exciting and interesting compared to the responses we received from a prompt like this, it was really exciting, and it made it really fun for the admission committee to read, because the responses were all over the map and all were so important, but they were really interesting. Now, the truth is, you don't need a statement prompt to get you into that space. So someone could very easily have thought, what's the greatest challenge of my generation, using this prompt that exists. But because the statement's not asking for that, you might not be thinking about something that big or that exciting. But if you are, you're applying to a bunch of schools that have more boring prompts like this, don't be afraid of, using your imagination to get it to the place the story you want to tell. Because there's no reason a student couldn't talk about a challenge of their generation that they want to address through their field of study, using a prompt like this here. So maybe you're not using the exact words of, this is the major challenge of my generation I want to talk about, but thinking about it in that way, because there's room to do that with a prompt that's not so exciting. Sort of tweak the prompt in your imagination to make it so that you're able to tell the exciting story you want to tell. I hope that makes sense, because it really, ideally schools will be, will feed you the prompt that will get you there. But even if they're not, it doesn't mean that you can't do that yourself.
So I'm going to take a moment now, and I'm just going to stop the recording so that way people are more comfortable asking questions off the recording than they could ask.